Mike, Sarah and Chris huddled close. Streetlights cast long, eerie shadows. It was Halloween night. Ridgewood School loomed before them, dark and silent.
You chicken, Chris?
Chris swallowed hard.
No way.
Sarah shivered.
Maybe we shouldn't.
Mike scoffed.
Scared? Legend says it's haunted. Dare you to go inside?
Chris hesitated, then puffed out his chest.
Fine, but if we see a ghost, you two are running first.
The heavy oak door creaked open, its ancient hinges groaning in protest. A musty, almost suffocating air wafted out, sending chills down their spines. Moonlight filtered through the grimy windows, casting long, sinister shadows that seemed to writhe and twist with a malevolent intent. "See, nothing scary," Mike whispered, his voice echoing eerily in the oppressive stillness. They crept down the hallway, their footsteps loud and intrusive in the suffocating silence. The air grew colder with each step, sending shivers down their spines and making their breath visible in the dim light. As they moved deeper into the house, the shadows seemed to grow bolder, flickering and shifting with a life of their own. Sarah clutched Chris's arm tightly, her eyes wide with terror. Suddenly, a shadow darted in the corner of her vision, its form almost human-like. She gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Chris nodded, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. They stood frozen, their hearts racing as they stared into the darkness, every nerve on edge. The silence was broken only by the sound of their own ragged breathing and the occasional creak of the old house settling. Every shadow seemed to hide a sinister secret, every flicker of light a potential threat. The darkness felt alive, watching them with unseen eyes. They knew they had to keep moving. Paralyzing fear held them in place. Finally, Mike took a deep breath, his face set with determination, and stepped forward, leading the way down the dark hallway. The others followed, their eyes darting nervously around the room. The shadows seemed to close in around them, alive and malevolent, as if waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
What was that?
Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Mike squinted, trying to peer through the darkness that enveloped the old school building. The air was thick with dust, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo ominously.
Probably just a rat.
His voice lacked confidence. They continued down the hallway, their eyes darting around nervously. The walls were lined with old lockers, some of which were slightly ajar, revealing forgotten textbooks and comics. At the end of the hall, a single classroom door stood ajar. Light spilled out, casting an eerie glow that seemed out of place in the otherwise dark and abandoned building.
Let's get out of here.
Chris pleaded, his voice barely a whisper. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat louder than the last. But Mike was already pushing the door open, curiosity. The door creaked loudly and the lights were
What are you, scared of a little light?
Mike's attempt at bravado did little to ease the tension. As the door swung open, they were met with an unexpected sight. The room was filled with old, yet chairs, but in the center stood a large, ornate mirror. The light seemed to be emanating from it, casting strange reflections on the walls. Sarah took a step back, her eyes wide with fear.
This doesn't feel right.
She said, her voice barely audible. Mike, however, was drawn to the mirror. He walked towards it, almost in a trance. Chris and Sarah exchanged worried glances, but followed him into the room. As they approached the mirror, the light grew even brighter, and they could see their reflections clearly. But something was off. Their reflections seemed to move independently, their expressions twisted and distorted.
We need to leave now.
Chris insisted, gripping Mike's arm. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind them, and the room was plunged into darkness. The only light came from the mirror, which now seemed to pulse with an eerie, otherworldly glow. They were trapped, and the air grew colder. The adventure they had sought had turned into a nightmare. The classroom was empty. Desks sat in neat rows. nothing here, Mike said, but his voice sounded hollow. Suddenly a loud bang echoed from the door. They spun around. The hallway was empty. The sound of noise. Someone's coming.
They scrambled under desks, hiding in the shadows.
The footsteps grew louder, closer.
Chris held his breath, his body trembling.
The footsteps stopped right outside the classroom.
The door creaked open, slowly, ominously.
A cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the light. Darkness enveloped them.
Sarah whimpered, burying her face in her hands.
Then, a whisper, cold and hollow, seemed to come from right beside them. "Get out."
Terror lent them speed. They scrambled out from under the desks, racing for the door. The footsteps thundered behind them, gaining ground. They burst into the library, slamming the heavy door shut behind them. Chris fumbled with the lock, his hands shaking.
"We're trapped," Sarah cried, her voice filled with despair.
The footsteps pounded against the door, rattling the lock. Chris struggled to catch his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, a section of bookshelves swung inward, revealing a dark opening behind them. A musty smell wafted out, making them cough.
"A secret passage," Mike exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement.
Without hesitation, they scrambled through the opening, pulling the bookshelf closed behind them. The passage was narrow and dark, the air thick with dust. They stumbled along, bumping into unseen objects. Whispers seemed to follow, faint and indistinct.
"Do you hear that?"
Sarah whispered her voice. They stopped listening. The whispers grew louder, slowly. The voices sounded sad, mournful.
"This place is truly haunted."
Chris whispered back, his voice filled with fear. The passage opened into a large, dusty room. Moonlight streamed through a broken window, illuminating cobwebs and decaying furniture. The whispers were louder here, clearer. Suddenly a figure materialized in the shadows, tall and gaunt, its eyes glowing an eerie green. A cold hand reached out, its fingers long and skeletal.
"Run!"
Mike screamed, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. They turned and fled, their blood turning to ice. The figure glided after them, its laughter echoing through the chamber, cold and menacing. They raced back through the passage, the whispers urging them on. The library door loomed ahead, a beacon of hope. But as they reached for the handle, it turned ice cold. The door wouldn't budge. It was locked. They were trapped. The figure's laughter echoed behind them, closer now, filled with triumph. They spun around, their hearts pounding in their chests. The figure stepped into the moonlight, its features becoming clear. It was a girl, no older than them, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. She reached out her hand, her touch icy cold. The air around them seemed to freeze, and a shiver ran down their spines. They could see the girl's breath in the cold night air. Each exhaled. Her clothes were dark, and she looked as if she had been wandering for a long time. The moonlight cast eerie highlighting the soul. They felt a strange mix of fear and compassion, unsure of what to do next. The girl's eyes locked onto theirs, pleading silently.
"Help me."
She whispered, her voice a mournful sigh. And then everything went black. The darkness was suffocating, wrapping around them like a thick blanket. They could hear their own breathing, rapid and shallow, as they tried to make sense of what had just happened. The girl's voice echoed in their minds, a haunting plea that refused to fade. They knew they had to find her, to understand her story, and to help her if they could. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with unknown dangers and mysteries, but they were determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost.